Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode of the Further Insights podcast. So excited to have Jeremy Silbert on the show. Thanks for coming in, Jeremy. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So I guess just to start things off, you could just give the audience an overview of who you are and, just what you do overall.
Sure. Born and raised in Baltimore. Sort of got to the seat that I'm in now with the two of you. I guess it's a non-traditional pathway that I've taken into the marketing and comms world. This is actually a second career for me. My first career, I spent 21 years working for the Baltimore City Police Department. I was a patrol officer, I was a detective, and then about halfway through my career, a temporary opportunity opened up to go to the media relations office for the police department. It was supposed to be for 30 days, and I ended up staying for 11 years in that role. I was one of the spokesmen for the police department. My last few years, I would be the deputy director of media relations for the police department, and then actually during the COVID pandemic, I was temporarily reassigned to City Hall to help the mayor and his executive team oversee some of the crucial messaging that was going out to the entire city related to the pandemic that was happening. After 21 years, I retired from the police department. I then went to work for another police department, a large department in the area, as their director of strategic communications. I did that for just under 2 years, and now I'm the director of marketing and communications at a nonprofit in Baltimore.
Did you grow up wanting to be a cop? And I guess a step further, did you always see yourself working in a religious institution after that? Are these things you wanted to do, or are these just places you found yourself?
They sort of just fell into place. I was a Jewish kid. I grew up in Pikesville. Can't say that I always wanted to be a police officer when I grew up. Certainly a shock to my family.
Like every good Jewish boy, you grew up
right. Especially you expect
lawyer,
to be
doctor,
something else.
Officer.
Right.
Yeah.
Police officers right up there at the top. So definitely a shock to everyone when I made that career choice. And initially, I only thought I'd do it for a couple of years. I tried, I'd see what would happen. And again, like everything in our lives, couple years, couple months turned into 21 years that I did that. And then to fast forward now, never thought over those 21 years that the next step after law enforcement would be going to work at a synagogue. Didn't see that coming either. But hey, here we are, right? That's
absolutely
that's life, and really a fantastic place. As I said, I'm the director of marketing and communications for Beth Congregation of Baltimore, and it's fantastic. We're doing some amazing things and having a lot of fun with some incredible people there.
So, religious institutions and law enforcement, very different kinds of worlds. I'm kind of curious, just in your background, how kind of marketing communications kind of work. How does it differ just based on the kind of the space that you're inhabiting there? What's been your experience in that?
Sure. So when I see people who I haven't seen in a couple years, or even when I just meet them and knowing my background, and I tell them that now I'm working in the, for a religious institution in the synagogue world, the first thing they always say is, are you overseeing their security? You must be the security guy. And no. And people have a hard time following, so you were doing comms and marketing for a police department and now you're doing it. And they have the same question that you do. And what I always tell people, the fundamentals are always the same of what we're trying to do. Whether you're doing this work for a police department, for a synagogue, whether you're working in the nonprofit world, or even if you're in the business-to-business world, the fundamentals are always the same. And the two things I go back to, audience and goals. Who's your audience? What are your goals? Whether you're marketing, whether you're in the crisis comms world, always goes back to those two fundamentals, regardless of where you are.
Did you study marketing in college?
I did not. My degree is in criminal justice. I've since had the opportunity to, I studied at University of British Columbia. They have a great business school up there, so I had that wonderful opportunity to do that. But really went in the police department backing up. When I first went to the media relations office, to their communications office, no experience. It was literally a 30-day assignment. One of the guys down there got hurt. They needed someone to fill in. I knew a guy who knew a guy, and he said, I think you'd be great. At first, I actually said, no, thank you, not interested. But then I said, 30 days, this is great. My mom will see me on the news. My dad will read my name in the paper. It'll be fun. And, through some really smart and intelligent and incredible people that I had the opportunity to work alongside, to work for. I was able to learn a lot on the ground. I went away to some schools, kind of picked stuff up as we went. And now looking back to my time in the police department, we really, for large police departments, and I'll say the Baltimore City Police Department, at least at the time, we were the 8th largest police department in the country. We kind of set the footprint for what large public safety agencies and even for some smaller ones were doing. And we talked a little bit right before we started and turned on the cameras about this direct-to-consumer, about kind of going the direct-to-consumer route. And prior, I'd say, to about 2010, maybe a few years before, and this will go and roll into what we're going to talk about also today, if someone in Baltimore wanted to find out if there was a crime in their area, if there was something significant that happened, what we all did, right, growing up is we'd watch the news at night. And there'd be a short clip on the news, whether it was from a press conference with the police commissioner speaking, one of the spokesmen, which is what I did. You'd go watch the news. You'd see a 5-second clip, a 10-second clip of what happened, and then that would be the end of it. And sort of how we got to that point, we would hold a press conference, police department. Myself, a police commissioner, someone else would come out and speak, and we might talk for 15, 20 minutes. The reporters would stand around, they'd ask us questions. But once our press conference was done, that reporter, that photographer, they would take their product back to the news station, and someone would edit it down. Not you as a consumer at home, but someone in this news station would edit it down, and they would choose that 5-second clip that you got to see on the news, maybe a 10-second, maybe a 15-second clip if it was really good or controversial, what I was saying. But that's all we would see as news consumers, as people who live in the community, who work in the community, who are stakeholders in this. But what we did in 2010 in the police department, and maybe it was the end of 2009 when the guys before me started this route, we started using social media to really reach out and touch everyone, this direct-to-consumer approach. We started pushing out our press conferences live. Back then, I think we used, I can't even think of what it was. One of these programs, it's not even there anymore. It was a live video. Then we would merge into Facebook Live, and the feedback that we got throughout the entire city, from East Baltimore, West Baltimore, north to south, everywhere in between, and then even across the state of Maryland, people were tuning into our press conferences and they were watching the entire thing live. And what we would tell people is, come to us. Let us tell you the whole story. Now, whether or not you believed us, what we were saying, that's a whole nother thing, but we were giving you all the information. And I can tell you personally, if a crime happened in my neighborhood, on my street, I would want to hear directly from the police chief, directly from the mayor, directly from the police commander in that area, and we really received some incredible feedback from doing that.
How does that experience translate into now nonprofit religious organization with many stakeholders and lots of information needed? Obviously, it's a little less volatile, I'd imagine, but are the principles of your communications strategy the same?
I brought that same strategy, and it was funny. Before, I was a member of the synagogue also. So I knew a lot of the clergy, knew a lot of the staff there, and we had some great conversations before I started working there, but it was that same foundation that I brought with me. And I always tell people one of the biggest challenges that I have now, right? I'm the marketing and comms guy at one of the larger synagogues in the state of Maryland. One of the challenges I have is communication. It's being able to reach out and touch every member of our Bethel community. And here's the reason why. We have some folks in the community who come to services every single day. Every morning, they're there 7 days a week. But some of these folks don't have social media. They might not even have email. And a couple might not even have a cell phone. So I need to message them, but at the same time, go all the way to the other side of that spectrum. We have parents in our religious school, parents in our infant toddler program who are probably in their early 20s. They don't even check email, but for a different reason. There's an app on their watch that they get their information. They use WhatsApp. They don't even use Facebook anymore. And then you have everyone in between. So there is such a wide range of people in the community, and what my challenge is to figure out from every single person, how do you get your information? How do you get it? And then I need to make sure that myself and my team, and I have to talk about the incredible team that I have, not just the folks working for me in marketing and communications office, but the support that I have from our professional staff to our clergy and of course our members. It's just incredible to do some of the things we've done, but it's figuring out how we can get our message and get it out to our entire audience. So that's definitely a challenge, but again, it's bringing that direct to consumer. I want you to hear about our programming. I want you to hear about the things that we're doing to support people. I want to be a storyteller, but I want to be the one to tell that story. I don't want to rely on a third party to have to tell that story.
I'm curious here. So, with such a diverse kind of audience that you serve with Bethel, how much do you really kind of hone in on a unified message that would really kind of resonate with all, no matter the kind of medium of how it's expressed versus segmentation? Like, how do you feel the strengths and weaknesses of both, and what are you personally practicing there?
So regardless of how small or how large the project is, whether it's about an upcoming program and we're being proactive or whether we're responding to something, it's using that model that's worked. And my background, my expertise, unfortunately, it's crisis communications. And I've had the opportunity to go around the country to talk to my colleagues and other folks and even teach a little bit the lecture about crisis comms in the public safety world. But every situation, every project, it's approaching it the same way, no matter how large or how small. Who's our audience and what are our goals? What do we need to get out there? What kind of information? As you touched on earlier, Andrew, it's not as time sensitive now in this world than the world where I came from, where we need to go out on camera right now and have a press conference in about 20 minutes, something crazy happened. The national news is here, international folks are watching. It's not really that world, but again, just as important, people in our smaller synagogue community, it's of importance to them. So it's just as important to have a plan to collaborate with other people inside of the organization. But I can't stress this enough. No matter what world you're in right now, whether it's the nonprofit, whether it's in public service, whether you're a small business or a large business, it's knowing who your audience is. It's knowing what they want. It's knowing how they get that information. But most importantly, if we get nothing else from this conversation, knowing that you have the ability to put out your message and go direct to consumer. And we receive great feedback from it.
I'm curious here, as someone with a non-traditional background in marketing myself here, jumping into it recently after experiences outside, I'm wondering if you feel that your experience as an officer has informed you to be a better marketer than maybe people who take a more traditional path, because like the way you're communicating, it's just so simple right here, just staying focused on the audience and their goals. And I wonder if maybe that's kind of a superpower that you have there, just in the interest of police work. When there is a situation on the ground, I'm sure you have to immediately respond to it for public safety. So you don't really need to be worrying about theory because of the immediacy and the urgency of it. I wonder how has that informed, your approach to marketing over the years?
I like the word superpower, and I hope the bosses over at the synagogue heard that, my superpower. But my title is marketing and communications, but I've got to tell you, back to your question, communications has to be at the top of any organization. And I'll jump back to the law enforcement career. Whether I was in that seat or whoever the director of communications was in the police department, which was the media relations office, we used to call it public affairs. The name changed a couple of times. But whoever is in that seat, whoever is the director, if they are not at the head table in the organization for every meeting and every decision that's made, that organization is going to be in trouble. And here's the reason why. Everything we do in life, I truly believe there is a communications piece to that. Your personal life, think about personal relationships that you have, the business relationships you have, whether they're with folks on the outside, whether they're your internal staff, there is a communications aspect to everything that we do. And I can't tell you how many times I'm doing consulting work or I'm talking to folks in the business world, and they're communicating with everyone except for one group. And you know who that group is more times than not? Their employees, their staff. The same people that you want to go out and help push out your message, they're the last to find out when something happens. And I was big on that in the police department. My second police department that I worked at as the strategic communications guy, we focused on making sure that our staff knew about something before we told the media, before we told the community. Not always possible in a perfect world, but for your organization, again, it doesn't matter what type of organization you're running, but if you're the CEO or if you're a decision maker in there, and if your communications person is not sitting with you at the table for meetings leading up to decisions, you might want to reevaluate.
It was interesting to hear you talk about live streaming and social media when you were working with the police department as a means to control your own narrative and really get more information out there. With the just absolute rise of short form video and podcasts and all that, you guys have built your own podcast network, which is really inspiring and great to see. I'm wondering what trends you're seeing now, akin to what you experienced when you guys took a leap onto live streaming back then.
Sure. So fast forwarding now in the synagogue world, we are one of the, I don't want to say we're the only, because there are other folks out there doing some great things, but we didn't just start a podcast at Bethel. We actually created an entire network. And within that network, we have about 4 or 5 shows. Some are weekly, some are monthly, some are here or there. These are actually shows. So it's not just one show. We have an entire network. We also feed additional content into that. Our weekly sermons, our talk about the weekly Torah portions, different things that we do, and we continue to put them out. But I think your question goes back to the larger point. So many people are flocking to social media right now. This technology is there. As an organization, we have to embrace it. And we did this into the police department. It was a little before 2010. I can only speak about from 2010 to when I left. But, we had our foot dipped in the water then, and continuing to do that. And now in the synagogue world, we know people are listening to podcasts. So why aren't we podcasting? Got to give a lot of credit to our executive director, Ben Wachstein, who had the vision and has supported everything that we've done in that aspect with it. And the same thing with the short videos. Right now when people are, and we know this from trends that we've seen, we know this from studies, people don't want to sit at their computer and watch a 3-minute video. Other than the podcast we're recording now. I know everyone's going to want to sit and watch this entire podcast, but we know that there are studies out there, there's data, and it's not hard for anyone to pull this data. People don't want to see a 3-minute video. You know what they want to see? A 10-second video clip. They want to see a 15-second video clip with an option for them to watch the whole thing later. So if you're not putting out short videos with content, but still linking to your larger video, again, you gotta do, what do we go back to? Who's our audience and what do they want? And we know from trends on social media, this is how people are getting their information. Something you asked earlier, in 2010, there was a shooting at Johns Hopkins Hospital. And at the time, we were really getting involved with social media. And we were one of the first large police departments to use social media during a crisis. And that was a crisis. And it wasn't just people in Baltimore. It wasn't just people in the United States. Johns Hopkins Hospital, that's a world-renowned institution. So when I tell you the amount of media, it wasn't 10 reporters, 20 reporters. There are pictures out there. It was hundreds of reporters, and those were just the folks that were there. Our cell phones stopped working. It was, I think, 3 or 4 of us in the media relations office at the time. Our phones stopped working because the number of phone calls, text, emails we were getting from around the world. So we were able to put out one message using social media and continue to provide updates, but drive all of the media, everyone from the community, who else were our audiences, all the folks that worked at Hopkins, everyone that was a stakeholder, we drove everyone to one location. And again, this might seem like a long time ago, when I guess in this world, 2010 is like ages ago. This was still new-ish. So it's just really relying on the technology. And you know what, in 5 years, someone's going to probably listen to our conversation today, probably you, and you're going to say, that was so old what they were talking about. Nobody uses that, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the evolution is so rapid. And I think the stat I heard recently from an AI executive was that the pace of Moore's law is actually outpaced itself. So exponential growth is now exponentially growing. The artificial intelligences are basically creating their own intelligences and their own softwares, and so the rate of innovation is extreme, and we know things are happening at a rapid pace, robots down the line. But with all this new technology, I think there's a lot of challenges. And I guess from the social media perspective, obviously as a police department, you guys probably had your fair share of issues there. But as a religious organization, particularly now in like a very divided civil discourse about certain key issues, i.e., Israel, things like that. How do you deal with that, communication-wise and technology-wise, from that perspective?
Well, first from the technology side, my message on that would be, don't be afraid of technology. It's okay to embrace it, but at the same time, make sure you have someone that's available to guide you through it. Because this is a lot for some people. Again, anyone that's been in this business for a while, hearing about AI and this and that, it's a lot, and it can cause a lot of anxiety. But don't be afraid of it. Make sure you do your homework, have somebody to help you navigate through it. With the current issues that we have right now, and first of all, working for a synagogue, it does allow me to be a lot more proactive with what we're doing. Except for in the police department, we had to be reactive a lot of times. Sometimes I'd go to work with a plan, we're going to do A, B, C, and D, but if in the middle of the day something crazy happens in West Baltimore, guess what? My plan for the entire week, if not the entire month, has now gone backwards 12 blocks because we have to deal with another situation. So I love the fact that we can be proactive, but October 7th, 2023, a lot changed on that day for us with social media. All of a sudden, some of our fun posts, some of our informative posts, we had to really be looking at everything, and I'm talking about constant monitoring because of the feedback that we would receive. And it wasn't the feedback because of something that our synagogue posted. It was the fact that we were a Jewish organization, and here you have this horrific course of events that happened in the Middle East, but a lot of people were taking that out on us. And we put out a lot of content, and this was a discussion that we had, was we're putting out so much content about our synagogue. Does that open us up? Because, we see the algorithms, our stuff, we get a lot of shares. We make our way around Facebook and Instagram and, not just in the Baltimore area. Our product go out, to other countries all across the United States. So we knew that was going to make us a target. But, there are things that we can do. We really had to step up our monitoring. We had to step up allowing people to message us. That's something that businesses look at. Do I want to accept messages on social media? Do I want people to be able to comment on stuff? And that was another discussion we had. Should we turn off our comments? This is just one example I'm using, but with Facebook. Should we completely shut off our comments and not allow people to comment on our content? And I said, absolutely not. Because as soon as we do that, first of all, they win, we lose. But second of all, we take away the community aspect of social media, right? And that's what it's a community. It's a two-way street. If I'm just communicating to someone, here's our message, here's what's happening, that's fine. But allowing people to comment and be a part of a community, that's really what our goal is at our synagogue. And that's what we do. The same folks who come in person, they also are part of this online social media community. So that was definitely a challenge for us, and it continues to be a challenge today of having to really be on there to monitor our content. One thing I've found, though, And this was true in the police department, actually both police departments I worked for. It's true in some of the consulting work that I've done for law enforcement and public safety agencies around the country, and it's true at the synagogue where I'm working now. More times than not, if you post content on social media, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, any of the platforms, and if you have someone who goes out and who writes something stupid or who attacks you, more times than not, your audience, your followers, they'll take care of the problem for you, right? You guys shaking your heads. They will go after that person. They will correct you. I can't tell you how many times I have to say this, but you don't feed the trolls. I have had to, right? You're laughing. I have had this conversation with police chiefs, with mayors, with governors, with just business owners. Protect your brands. Don't go back and forth with someone on social media. Don't engage
Half
the
these
trolls.
people are bots too, and we know that too. So the AI is great, but it also is creating an environment where people can hate at scale. It's
Correct.
possible on the internet now, but with the right parameters, it sounds like you've been able to kind of prevent that from escalating.
I don't know if you can always prevent it, but it is a work in progress, and we've had to adjust a little bit our social media strategy. But again, this is technology, this is moving parts, it's constantly, we're looking, what are we doing, what can we done, what has worked in the past. So, there's not a playbook that you can just put down and say, this is the only way to do it. Because again, if you do that, you're going to be left in the dust.
All right, and we're back here with Jeremy Silbert from Bethel Congregation here in Baltimore, Maryland, and having an amazing conversation about the importance of communications in marketing. I wonder how you guys as a synagogue look at what we like to call customer acquisition, or member or congregant acquisition. I don't know what your term is, but how do you guys look at bringing new people in? How do you look at data? Do you use ads? Like, what does that look like in the religious world?
So I'm so glad you brought up the word data, because if we're not looking at data from the comms world, from the marketing world, from any world, we can even go back to my time in the police department. If we're not making decisions based off of the data, why are we making those decisions? In the synagogue world, what are our goals? We'll back up. Who's our audience? What are our goals when it comes to marketing? Let's just say we're having an event. Our goal is to bring in people to that event. We can look at data. When was the last event? Did people come? Who's coming? How do we market to this type of person to come? But it's the numbers, the data are so important. How should we be reaching out to them? In the last segment, we touched on how do people get their information? Are they getting it through email, through text, through social media, through a different venue? We've got to look at those numbers. We've got to look at that data as well to ensure that we're spending our time and our effort in the right place.
And so are you using primarily social media to get new folks in the door, to build awareness? Are you guys doing any advertising? Like, what is your primary tool for acquiring new members?
It's a little bit of everything. I will tell you one thing that I have found works incredibly well in the synagogue world over the last few years that I've been there. And these are influencers. And when I say the word influencer, I think all of our heads jump to who's selling a pair of sneakers, or who's going to a new restaurant, or actually I guess now anyone can be an influencer. If you have an Instagram account and live near a restaurant or something, you can go in and take pictures of your food. But whether it's an event, whether it's members, whether we're looking to raise money, it's influencers within our community. And I have found that bringing in certain people strategically, talking to them, what are your thoughts on this? How can we bring in more people like you? How can we bring in more events like this? How can we do A, B, C, or D? But when you open up your circle, and again, it goes back to communications, right? I know we keep saying that, but you start talking to people, and then that influencer becomes a third-party validator. Back in, again, 2010, 2012, 2016, we were talking about third-party validators, right? Same idea, we just call them influencers now, because I guess it's the new way to call people. But when you have somebody, I can certainly vouch for a synagogue. Our clergy, they can say, hey, this is great, this is great. We can have people on the staff do that. But when you have somebody who looks like you, who talks like you, who shares your interest, whose kids go to school with your kids, who you grew up with, when you have that person and they're saying this works, more times than not, I like what that person said. I'm going to try it. So we've put a lot of stock in that, and we've had some great resources also, but it's thinking outside of the box also. Every organization, every company, we all have different goals, a different audience, and sometimes you got to step out where it's a little uncomfortable. I'll go back to our podcast that we started. I was on board when our executive director, when we started having these conversations, but there were some people that said, a podcast in a synagogue? What are you going to talk about? The Torah? And you've seen firsthand. We haven't just grown to one show. We have an entire network now. So it's thinking outside of the box. It's trying something new. You've got to look at data on all these decisions. And again, it's a huge communications aspect with all of this, I think.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great leaders in the space, Gary Vee, kind of always talks about influencers. So, with influencers and podcasts being a huge part of your strategy, I'm kind of curious, do you kind of keep those as the two main focus points? Or, do you take a wider approach and take a whole bunch of other kind of angles in marketing and communications right there in terms of the actual techniques? Or what have you found in your experience to be more effective?
That's a great question. So really, depending on the project, it's always a little different with what we're doing. We have to hear that feedback. Something else that we've done recently is we're now using, we have QR codes around the building, and we allow people not just to join our Wi-Fi through the QR code, but to send us feedback on Google. And we're using that to hear feedback from people. My conversations, if I'm looking to do something in the marketing world for a project, I don't just talk to the staff that work with me. I talk to the entire staff at the synagogue. I bring this up in our senior leadership meetings. I bounce the idea off of people throughout the buildings. I might talk to some of our members. I like to hear feedback from everyone before we start a project, before we do something, especially if it's new. I try to get as much feedback as possible to figure out, is this something we should try? And if we should, how should we? Gary Vee, it's a great account to follow. I mean, it's just hours and hours of content and entertainment, but the stuff that he talks about, it's the same stuff the three of us are talking about today. It's just going out, it's being yourself, it's setting goals. If you're looking to market, who's your audience? What do they want? You cut out all the tape, all the extra stuff, because at the end of the day, people aren't interested in that. If you're talking to me, send me your message in 15 seconds. I don't really care about what your background is, what you've done in the past. I want to know why you're talking to me today. What are you trying to sell me? How can I find out more information? And that's it. Make sense?
Absolutely. That's incredible insight. I guess on a closing note, if you could give a small business owner one piece of advice, obviously communication being paramount, but let's just say they have a really tight budget. They've got to get their message out there. They're not necessarily a great orator or writer, or maybe uncomfortable in social media. What is the one thing someone can do from your perspective in 2025 to become successful with utilizing marketing to help grow their business?
Call me. Just kidding.
Call us, not him.
Right. Call one.
Call all of us. Yeah,
Call either of us.
Yeah.
Call them. Yeah. Call the two guys sitting next to me, because they really are they really are amazing. But in all seriousness, the advice that I would give them is, don't be discouraged. Don't be discouraged by a budget. Don't be discouraged if you're not familiar with technology. Don't be discouraged. There are ways out there and we're talking low budget campaigns that have turned into $1 million, if not more, campaigns. We've seen examples of businesses that are literally on their last leg, and after a small, they take a chance, they go down a road that they may not have been comfortable with, they're able to turn things around. So my advice would be, don't be discouraged. But again, have someone who you trust help guide you through that, because there are things that you can do with a very small budget that can help you as a small business. So please don't get discouraged.
Well, that's incredible insight. Thank you so much for joining the podcast, Jeremy. Really appreciate it.
Really
Thank you,
appreciate,
guys. I appreciate
coming
the
out here.
opportunity to come on.
Absolutely. Well, I'm Andrew Schuster,
And I'm Alfonso Colasuonno.
and this has been Further Insights, the podcast. Thanks again to Jeremy Silbert, our guest, and we'll see you next time.